My name's Yvonne Ryan. I'm managing editor of the World in 2014, 2000, where are we now? 2013, which you can see there. It's my job to take it from this, which is my rather dodgy camera phone picture, to this. Get it on the newsstands, on budget, on time, get all the articles in, get everybody, get it moving through the system. So if you don't know, if you've never seen this before, the World In's been going since 1987. That's an early one, which in fact I was just looking at on Monday, and there was barely anything technological in it. It was all politics, almost no technology, but it sort of seems to have been turned on its head. We have circulation of about 1 million, readership of about 2 million, published in 29 languages, including Mongolian, apparently, Albanian, Turkish, Catalan, Arabic, French, English, you name it. We're covered. We do quite a lot of business with second rights, so companies, say, in Turkey will take some of the content, repackage it, translate it, put in some of their own local content, and send it on its way. So it's a nice, profitable little business for The Economist. It's written primarily by economist journalists with some commentators from the FT, a handful of other regular contributors, and then what we call the great and the good contributors. So there'll be people like Aung San Suu Kyi last year, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Melinda Gates did a piece this year. The President of Mexico did a piece, the Prime Minister of Thailand. So it's usually about a dozen of those. There's a very nice Chinese science chap who talks about genomics, who's very nice. It's about 93 articles, 130-odd pages, about 87 writers. So it's quite a lot of juggling involved. Predictions. So everybody looks ahead, clock strikes 12 on New Year's Eve and everybody's wondering what's going to happen. And it's our job to try and let people, give people an idea without getting egg on our face, which is quite a hazardous... Any attempt at making predictions is a hazardous occupation. Every year we do a little compilation. We send people out in the streets, video, just ask people on the streets what they hope for or what their predictions are. So this is a compilation that we did for this year.
Για το 2013, για να είμαι ειλικρινής, δεν είναι τόσο το θέμα της οικονομικής συρρίκνωσης γενικά σε όλη τη χώρα, όσο είναι το θέμα της κοινωνικής αναταραχής.
但是2013年肯定最大的愿望还是店里还是越来越比较好一点，生意越来越兴旺比较好。
这明年就是在国际大环境中啊，应当搞好合作。
I hope for a better leadership. I hope for a better clarity of thinking. I hope for better thrust in the economic decisions.
I obviously wish that there are more jobs next year so that I can get a better job, a better pay package, maybe.
Ich glaube, dass 2013 die Konflikte zwischen Arm und Reich und das Thema Armut, Reichtum sowohl in unserem Land als auch in der Welt noch größer werden.
I'd say I'm a little bit more positive as I can see that people are spending more money than they were throughout this year.
Don't expect too much, basically. Yeah, I think financially and politically.
There would be more of a focus on education and closing the achievement gap, and also that gay marriage would be legalized.
Big steps are going to be made towards protecting civil liberties and really cementing the importance of them to our country as a whole.
Last year we did 3, I think, one in Beijing, one in New York and one in London. And it was like tracking the world economy. So the one in China, in Beijing, everybody was really optimistic. It's going to be a great year. It's fantastic. Really looking forward to it. New York, it was a sort of, well, it could go either way. And we think it's going to come out the best. And London it's going to be terrible. It's just going to be awful. And there was a taxi driver who said, I don't know why we're even bothering. We all felt suicidal just watching it. For the 20th anniversary of the World Inn, did I say it's in its 28th year? For the 20th anniversary, the historian Niall Ferguson looked back at 20 years worth of predictions, and he said that apparently there's a sort of theory amongst those who write about the future, that actually you always write about the future, but reflecting on the present. So you know. And I just came across this article in the LA Times magazine. 25 years ago, the LA Times devoted an issue of its magazine to speculating about what Los Angeles of 2013 might look like. And this was its vision. And they reprinted it last month. And it was fascinating, because in between all of the hoverboards and the forecast of cheap, ubiquitous household robots that would free everybody up, they actually were talking about desks in schools that would be replaced with computer screens, and walls that would become computer screens. But when they were talking about and contacting colleagues, video conferencing colleagues in Japan, but they were talking about the explosion of knowledge and how accessible knowledge would be to everybody because of laserdiscs. It was laserdiscs that would make knowledge available, because the whole contents of the Library of Congress would be on a laserdisc. So they completely failed, understandably failed to imagine the internet, and mobile technology wasn't even mentioned. So you could see it was quite easy to see how you can just touch on the possible, but there'll be something that you completely miss. I don't know whether predicting 12 months ahead in the way that the World Inn does makes it a hostage to fortune or not, or whether it's almost easier to speculate 25 years ahead. But we do what we do. How has the World Inn done so far in its predictions? Well, one very keen graduate student is looking at predictions and punditry for his thesis for some reason, and he's decided to look at the World Inn to try and assess what its success rate is. So he looked at 149 predictions that the World Inn had made between 2004 and 2012, and apparently we had a 59% success rate for elections, which apparently was quite respectable. So it's too early to tell how we're going to do this year. But so far, I think Google Glass was one of the articles that we mentioned. That's now getting a lot of traction. It's suddenly becoming a reality. Nanya wanted me to tell you that our technology correspondent in California is actually from Norwich. So there you are, giving him a plug. So this year, for example, just when we were going to press, we go to press at the beginning of November, we got caught out by the resignation of the Director General of the BBC, who very kindly managed to time his resignation to, I think, 3 days after it had rolled off the press. So we missed that one. But it's always a bit up to the wire about who's going to, whether somebody's going to go or stay. Do we keep him in? Do we take him out? So the process of actually how we predict the future, it would be lovely if it was as scientific as this. I wish I could say that we have a very scientific process. In actual fact, it starts with a chocolate eclair. Around about, my boss Daniel and I start thinking from about now about we looking in magazines, articles we find online. His full-time job is at The Economist. He's in charge of what we call the back half of the book, so the business, finance and science section. So he's doing this stuff every day. He goes to conferences, so he's always talking to people. So we pick up things all over the place. We've got a Google Docs file that we just add to. And eventually we have this sort of long 15-page document with all sorts of random people that we could invite to ask for us, like Bruce Springsteen or George Clooney. They're always at the top of the list. And then we work our way down. Then in May, we have what we call a commissioning tea at The Economist, where chocolate eclairs are a big feature, mainly because Jeff, the science editor, loves eclairs. But as he failed to come to the last meeting, and I hate eclairs, I'm instigating a revolution this year, and there will be no eclairs. So at the tea, this is when the Economist journalists all come together. They just bring us their ideas. And they base this on the people that they talk to. So the Asia editor he knows what's coming up in his region. He's got his contacts. He'll suggest people that we need to talk to. The technology editor, science editors, they've all got their interests, and they're really the ones who give us our steer on what we should be looking at, who we should be inviting, which would be the big subjects to cover. So from that, we then develop a synopsis list, which is like the fantasy list. And between May and September, which is where the team get together, and that's when the work starts full time, you can then see, which people are taken away, who people who've said yes, and off we go. It's quite tricky because you're asking people to think. The obvious things, it's the elections, that's obvious. But then, this time last year, when we were looking at what we might be thinking about, the big story that was everywhere was Apple. Is Apple going to be the first billion-dollar company? It seemed unstoppable. That everybody we asked, what should we be writing about? Apple. Look what's happened this year. It's taken a turn. Who'd have thought? The Arab Spring, that was the other big thing that was on everybody's mind last year. Again, that's changed in a way that people didn't quite expect. And then we get caught out by things like Cyprus. The banking crisis in Cyprus, out of the blue. Well, maybe somebody somewhere had their finger in the wind, but so you've got to try and balance this thing between what the subject is when we're beginning to think about it and what might be relevant this time next year. American election, case in point, the year before, when we were doing the World in 2012, the Republican frontrunners seemed clear. Suddenly, 2 months later, it had all changed, and we'd luckily managed to fudge it. So you'll notice there's quite a lot of may happen, could happen, because actually, you don't really want to pin your colours to the mast quite that clearly. Sorry, I'll skip over that because I think 5 minutes. Just to try and say, so now we're, what we're finding now is it used to be, once this appeared, once it was printed, on the newsstands, that was it. End of story for another year. But now the tail gets longer and longer every year, so now we have the Facebook page, the Twitter feed, we've got a Google Plus Hangout that the editor does once or twice before the end of the year. We've got a channel page on economist.com, we've got a blog, Cassandra. All of these get maintained for 2 months, December and January, and then we stop until the mid-November and the next issue comes out. So we're always trying to look at ways of how we can keep the content relevant. This article, bizarrely, got quite a lot of coverage initially, got something like, I think it's 40,000 hits, 40,000 views on economist.com, the first 3 days it was published. January 1st, it gets picked up as a daily chart, so literally just the table, which got picked up on various news sites, and suddenly got 1 million page views. Apparently, the economist.com gets something like 30 million page views a month. So this one article got 1 million. Took everybody by surprise, but it's made us think, what do we need to be thinking about? How can we be repurposing our content to engage readers and make it more lively? And then, of course, there's the app question. Naturally, everybody wants to read this now on a variety of formats. 2 years ago, we did a sampler app just for the iPad. So we didn't really want to generate any additional content, but we published 6 articles. We repurposed some of the content into these grids, and we did a little bit of video. This year, we've done same format. Again, it's another sampler. This time it was for the iPad, iPhone, and Android tablets. We were slightly limited because of the content management system that we were using. So again, the grids, we did a sort of slightly interactive calendar. There was a little bit more video, and there was it was an exclusive chart survey at the end. But the big question for us now is whether to offer the whole thing as an app, because it's obviously frustrating that you get to the end of the sampler app and it says, go out to your local news agent and go and buy it, when you'd naturally expect to be able to press a button and off you go. But there are all sorts of considerations about how to do that, and if we do that, will it impact newsstand sales? Is it going to have much impact on advertising revenue? And also the unique nature of the World Inn, this 3 or 4 months lifespan that it has, what does that mean then for the rest of the year? Would consumers expect to see more content updated more regularly? Well, we don't really have the resources for that because we're a part-time team. We come together in September, there for 12 weeks, and then we all go off and do our own thing again. And I'm not sure there's much appetite to turn this into a full-time thing. So we're just beginning to think about the digital strategy for next year. And it possibly might seem quite obvious to people. I don't know. I'd be interested in the pub, actually, to get some thoughts about it, because there are so many considerations, but it seems unarguable that this is the way to go. This is what people expect. People expect to be able to read this digitally. How do we satisfy that consumer demand without actually bankrupting ourselves, I suppose? So this is really more questions than answers, I suppose.
Do you think 2014 is the year you'll have to make that decision?
Yes, I do. I think it would be odd to have a sampler app for a third year running. Yeah. I wouldn't be happy with that, and the editor wouldn't be happy with that. But it's just a matter of trying to marry the commercial considerations with what we think is absolutely the right way to go. And also, actually, what sort of content would we do? Because you can't just put the PDF up there, naturally. If it's on an iPad, people expect something more interesting. So do we then, again, generate specific content, digital content? Would that require more people? These are the questions that we're asking ourselves. And I'd love to say we have answers, but actually all we have are questions, which possibly should be where I'd finish, I think.
Questions.